Russia on fire, frozen in snow, and Putin under threat. Russia is burning under precise Ukrainian strikes. Neptunes and storm shadows hit without missing. Refineries, air defenses in Crimea, and critical infrastructure are under attack. Then comes total collapse. Crimea is buried in snow, roads left unclear, traffic paralyzed. Russia can't even cope with winter. And then Putin was targeted again? The Kremlin says it was an assassination attempt and then immediately contradicts itself. What's the truth? And finally, the real nightmare for Moscow. Ukraine is developing its own HIMARS analogue. Analysts say this system could reshape the war. Fire, frost, fear, and a weapon that could change everything. Today we'll break down what's happening right now. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. Christmas has turned into a fiery hell for Russia. Ukraine delivered a series of precise strikes. Oil storage tanks were burning at the port of Temryuk, and gas processing plant in Orenburg was shut down, and storm shadow alerts swept across all regions of Russia. Storm shadows and Neptunes are hitting without a miss. Refineries, air defenses in Crimea, and critical infrastructure are under attack. In particular, the SBU struck oil storage tanks at the port of Temryuk and the gas processing plant in Orenburg. 2 oil product tanks are burning at the port, while a strike on the plant ignited gas in a pipeline, forcing the facility to halt its technological operations. Meanwhile, in Russia, cruise missile alerts for storm shadow are being sounded more and more frequently. The storms have struck their targets with pinpoint accuracy. Neptunes also hurried to congratulate the occupiers on the holiday in temporarily occupied Crimea, according to reports from Russian Telegram channels. A snow-induced collapse has gripped Crimea. Snow-covered roads are going uncleared, and the snowfall has been so heavy that traffic is severely disrupted in some areas.
The Ministry of Emergency Situations has issued an emergency warning about hazardous hydrometeorological phenomena in Crimea. Vehicles, including trucks, have accumulated along the Sevastopol-Yalta highway, blocking the road.
Snowstorms are also causing public transport problems in Kamchatka. Governor Vladimir Solodov said that the official vehicle fleet of the Kamchatka regional government and the capital's administration will switch to a free taxi mode for residents, with cars running during peak hours along bus routes that have yet to be fully restored. Strikes on Putin's palace. Russia's air defenses allegedly intercepted 91 attack drones heading toward the Kremlin leader's residence. This was stated by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who threatened a response.
Russia's negotiating position will be revised, taking into account the Kiev regime's final transition to a policy of state terrorism. The targets and timing of Russia's retaliatory strike following the attack on Putin's state residence have been determined.
At the same time, Lavrov said that Russia has no intention of withdrawing from the negotiation process. In addition, Putin's advisor Yuri Ushakov reported that the Russian dictator allegedly raised the issue of the attack during a conversation with US President Donald Trump. According to him, Trump allegedly promised afterward to change his approach to communicating with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy called the Russian side's statements yet another lie and warned that they could be preparation for new strikes against Ukraine, including Kyiv. According to him, Moscow is looking for a pretext to attack government buildings in an attempt to derail Ukraine's diplomatic efforts together with its partners.
This is a fake story that Russia needs to justify further attacks and to avoid taking real steps toward ending the war.
The president also emphasized that unlike Russia, Ukraine is not taking actions that could weaken diplomacy.
A typical Russian tactic of lies. Moreover, they have already struck Kiev, including the building of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. Ukraine does not take steps that could undermine diplomacy. Russia always does. That is one of the many things that distinguishes us.
It is also noteworthy that significant inconsistencies have been recorded in statements by Russian officials. In particular, Russia's Ministry of Defense reported that 89 drones were shot down over various regions of Russia. At the same time, Lavrov claimed that as many as 91 drones were allegedly flying specifically toward Putin's residence in the Novgorod region. Or could be the Kremlin so rattled by the successful US-Ukraine talks? Meanwhile, Ukraine is preparing its own analog of the HIMARS system. Domestic specialists are working on an equivalent of an American multiple launch rocket system. The system is currently in the development stage. It is expected to be a single universal platform capable of launching various means of destruction, GMLRS-type rockets for HIMARS as well as missiles for different purposes. According to experts, the development of a HIMARS analog is driven by the desire to reduce Ukraine's dependence on the US defense industry. Analysts suggest the domestic system will be built on a European chassis. Theoretically, the system could be used not only to launch rockets and missiles, but also drones. As an example of such a multifunctional system, experts cite the new Europol's GTF, which among other capabilities can launch Sky Striker loitering munitions. Ukraine has the capability to liberate Transnistria from Russian occupation, and to do so decisively. This was stated by Kyrylo Budanov, who emphasized that Ukraine possesses the necessary means for such an operation. What this statement really means, how realistic this scenario is, and what geopolitical factors come into play, details in our report.
Ukraine can resolve the issue with Transnistria if it wants to, and resolve it radically. This was stated by the head of Ukrainian intelligence, Kyrylo Budanov.
They will hold back their group. Everything is fine with them there. For us, this could be more of a threat. And we can resolve this issue if we set our minds to it. Resolve it radically. But is it necessary to do this? This is where geopolitical questions begin.
But when asked whether it is worth doing, he answered in his own style. He said he would refrain from answering. Official Chisinau has repeatedly stated that they see the solution to the problem only through diplomacy. Moldovan President Maia Sandu has repeatedly insisted on a peaceful approach to resolving the situation in Transnistria. But all these attempts have been in vain. Budanov believes that expecting everything to resolve itself on its own is also not advisable.
It will not cease to exist by itself. What are the prerequisites for that? If we are talking about the Transnistria issue, whether we like it or not, then we have to compare Moldova with the Russian Federation and their respective strengths. So, do they have such strength?
They do not have the strength, which is why Moldova continues to wait. But the enclave remains a source of Russian influence and a potential threat, for Ukraine in particular. Now, discussions about Transnistria have intensified after a massive attack on the village of Mayaki, through which a key bridge for connecting with the southern districts of the Odessa region passes. On December 18th, the crossing was damaged. After the strikes on the bridge over Satoka and the subsequent forced closure of the road, the route through Mayaki was the only one connecting Odessa and the southern part of the region. The distance from the city to Mayaki in a straight line is almost 40 kilometers, and the distance from Mayaki to Transnistria is about 30 kilometers, in a straight line.
They are trying in this way to cut off the entire western part of Odessa region from transport communications. And this is the access to logistics on the Danube.
The attack on the bridge caused alarm, also because the main intelligence directorate had issued a warning. Russia is urgently increasing its activity in Transnistria. Their goal is to create an additional point of tension and to divert Ukrainian forces from other directions. It doesn't sound very favorable, but here it's worth recalling the size of the contingent in the enclave. According to experts, the number of Russian volunteers in Transnistria is estimated to be somewhere between 1,200 and 1,700 people.
Today, Russia does not have the capability to carry out a naval or ground operation. All of this is an information psychological operation. Of course, it is intensifying. This includes airstrikes, missile and drone attacks. They are ongoing constantly.
But of course, it's also not something to be treated carelessly. In addition to the expected information psychological operations, there could also be infiltration by sabotage and reconnaissance groups into Ukrainian territory.
Certain provocations are possible because the FSB branch in Tiraspol is not idle. It is active there. But again, how effective are they and what can they actually do? Send sabotage and reconnaissance groups into our territory. We understand perfectly well where their journey will end and how it will unfold. Of course, I think the Kremlin is considering the possibility of provocations in order to emotionally influence the local population living along the border with the so-called Transnistria. Of course, that's possible. But the response from the defense forces in this direction will be tough and appropriate.
After the previously mentioned strike on the beacons, there was a threat of a humanitarian catastrophe, but it was avoided. Following the attacks, Ukraine and Moldova quickly agreed on alternative routes of communication for the south of the Odessa region. But even that turned out to be unnecessary. Ukraine managed to restore traffic on its own roads. As for Transnistria, Moldova is currently developing a plan to unify the country together with the EU and the US. The details of this plan are not being disclosed. Official Chisinau says they are working on a strategy and a roadmap for reintegration, but they can't talk about it because they're afraid it might do harm.
Ukrainian weapons are tearing through Russia's army. On the close front line, Ukraine relies on low-cost radio-controlled FPV drones, which according to Ukrainian assessments became the leading cause of enemy losses in 2025. Even inside Russia, officials have admitted they are falling behind Ukraine in the field of heavy drones. How Kyiv gained this edge and why Moscow can't keep up, our journalists have the details.
A new level and scale. Ukraine is accelerating the development of its own defense industry and preparing to introduce new artillery, missile, and unmanned systems. More than 50% of the weaponry in the Ukrainian army is domestically produced, which not only allows them to destroy the enemy on the front lines, but also to strike deep into Russia.
Today, Ukraine is one of the leaders, and I would even say a trendsetter, in the production of long-range drones, ballistic weapons, cruise missiles, and unmanned drones. Well, in some respects, I am, of course, getting ahead of myself, but we can already say that Ukraine has managed not only to scale up its program for the use of aerial strike drones to the level of systematic operations against the rear of the Russian Federation, but also to deploy unmanned boats and maritime drones in the Black Sea, which has completely blocked the Black Sea for the Russian occupiers.
The armed forces of Ukraine are successfully attacking military targets in the Russian Federation. Ukrainian drones have delivered a historic blow to Russia's oil industry, paralyzing 38% of its refineries and creating an unprecedented crisis in the fuel market. Since the start of the full-scale war, Ukraine has ramped up weapons production and the implementation of new technologies which are already being used at the front. The armed forces of Ukraine have begun using domestically produced Sapsan ballistic missiles to strike the enemy. Ukraine has also improved the effectiveness of its Neptune and Flamingo missile strikes. More than 500 Ukrainian companies are involved in the development and production of UAVs. The equipment is tested in combat conditions every day. Ukraine's defense industry is capable of producing up to 8 million drones per year, provided there is sufficient funding. FPV drones, bomb-carrying reconnaissance drones, interceptors, tactical kamikaze drones, and fiber optic drones.
Russia is significantly behind in this area, while Ukraine is actively developing new types for various purposes with different characteristics. And that says a lot. This points to a much broader perspective on the technical and technological possibilities for solutions within a specific component of strike capabilities: long-range attack drones.
Currently, the number of FPV drones on the Ukrainian side exceeds the number of such drones used by the Russian occupiers. Moreover, Russia has admitted that it is lagging behind Ukraine in the field of heavy drones.
Indeed, as of today, Ukraine is far ahead of Russia when it comes to the use of attack drones. I would even go further. Ukraine has a whole range of different types of long-range attack drone modifications which are used under various conditions or in combination. And what is Russia known for in this regard? It is known for simply taking and copying the Iranian Shahed 136, renaming it Geran 2, and using it against Ukraine, occasionally modifying the overall concept.
The war has become a powerful catalyst for the development of Ukraine's defense industrial complex. The volume of domestic weapons production has increased by dozens of times. Thanks to private companies, Ukraine is able to create innovations in the defense industry and effectively implement them on the battlefield.
Until 2022, we had a very modest military budget and limited technologies. But nevertheless, thanks to our creativity, we were able to surpass Russia in a number of areas. Even though, before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia had, in some sense, compared to us, a much larger, almost unlimited resource base. At present, yes, in a number of missile technologies, we have achieved results that even Russia does not have. Take the same Flamingo missile, even though it is a mobilization type and rather raw product, it already has a base range of 3,000 kilometers.
All this means that Ukrainian developers have demonstrated the ability to create high-precision weaponry capable of destroying important enemy military targets deep behind the front lines.
Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin remains convinced that a total victory in Ukraine is within reach. Russian generals and security services are once again and systematically polishing frontline reports. Western media say Putin regularly meets with trusted insiders who warn that the war is increasingly hitting Russia's economy. Yet he still clings to the belief in victory. At military briefings, Ukrainian losses are exaggerated, Moscow's supposed resource advantages are highlighted, and tactical failures are quietly brushed aside. How Putin's generals manufacture successes for their leader while concealing real defeats, coming up next in our report.
Russian generals and intelligence agencies embellish reports about the situation at the front for the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin.
The West military group has taken control of the strategically important city of Kupansk, which the enemy is unsuccessfully trying to reclaim.
Putin believes that Russia has almost defeated Ukraine and therefore refuses a ceasefire. This is reported by the Financial Times. Western officials told the publication that Putin, under the influence of fake information coming into the Kremlin, refuses to accept favorable terms for ending the war offered by American President Donald Trump.
Russian military and intelligence agencies regularly provide Putin with reports on the war. These reports exaggerate Ukraine's losses, highlight the advantages of the Russian Federation in terms of resources, and downplay tactical failures.
According to the publication's sources, this optimistic picture presented to the Kremlin dictator during military briefings makes him believe that he can win the war.
Our troops are grinding down the enemy, their formations and reserves.
Putin's blind faith remains unchanged even though he regularly meets with trusted confidants who explain to him how the war is becoming an increasing burden for Moscow's faltering economy.
Russian generals tell Putin what he wants to hear. He wants victories from them, demands victories, and they present these victories to him.
The key figure responsible for informing Putin about the situation at the front is the chief of the general staff of the Russian armed forces, Valery Gerasimov. Encouraged by information that Ukraine would not offer resistance, he led the offensive on Kiev in February of 2022, which ended in failure and a humiliating retreat. In August 2024, Gerasimov reported to Putin that Russia had stopped the advance of Ukrainian defense forces in the Kursk region, although part of the territory was already under the control of Ukrainian troops. On November 20th, Valery Gerasimov announced the capture of Kupansk by Russian forces.
The units of the West Group liberated the city of Kupansk and continues the destruction of Ukrainian armed forces formations encircled on the left bank of the Oskol River.
For the generals, the continuation of the war is a blessing, since they gain status, funds, and resources. They are the most significant people in the state, so why not fabricate victories? Especially if the leadership demands them. Later, if anything, we can fix it somehow.
Following Gerasimov, Putin himself continued to talk about Kupiansk and its capture. According to the Russian dictator, Ukrainian forces near Pokrovsk and Kupiansk are blocked.
The Kupiansk and mountainous Krasnoarmysk adversary ended up encircled and blocked. By the way, I discussed this issue with the commanders of the respective groups. They are not at all opposed to potentially allowing media representatives, including journalists and reporters, into the enemy's heavily fortified encirclement zone, which is a restricted area.
Amidst active fighting on December 12th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy arrived in Kupiansk-Kharkiv region. He posted a selfie video on social media. Near the bullet-riddled stele at the entrance to the city, he demonstrated that the Russian side's claims of supposedly full control over Kupiansk do not correspond to reality, and that Kupiansk is controlled by Ukraine.
Today, the Kupiansk direction, our soldiers here are achieving results for Ukraine. The Russians have said a lot about Kupiansk. We see this. I was there. I congratulated the guys. And
so what do Putin's pathetic attempts to explain Zelensky's video look like? Near the stele at the entrance to Kupiansk, which the dictator had previously claimed to have taken. During a live broadcast, Putin repeated that the city is under Russian control and called Zelensky's video a fake.
He's a talented performer, and I say that without any irony. We know this from his movies, even from earlier times. So there's nothing unusual about this. They say the Stele looks completely different now, but that's not the point. The Stele is about a kilometer away from the city itself, so why just stand on the doorstep? Come on in. That's absolutely right. If the strategic city of Kupiansk is already firmly under their complete control, then the situation becomes significantly more critical.
Military experts confirm that Putin is systematically being lied to about the situation at the front, and in particular about Kupiansk.
The Russians have already claimed 3 times that they've surrounded and captured Kupiansk. Or, as they say, that they've liberated it. For this, General Kuzovlev himself, who is the commander of the Western forces, was even awarded the title Hero of the Russian Federation on December 9th.
Meanwhile, ZVN correspondents have started backtracking and are openly stating that the Russian military is exhausted. So taking any major cities is out of the question.
Believe me, our troops are really worn out, exhausted, depleted. Everyone who has been there knows this perfectly well.
Meanwhile, Z channels are reporting that Ukraine has effectively regained control over the city. Russian troops no longer control Kupiansk.
Judging by this map, the armed forces of the Russian Federation have already lost almost the entire territory of Kupiansk. But at least everyone got their medals. Apparently, in the future, we should expect a third liberation of Kupiansk. The situation has developed so that reports were filed, and now all the regiments are being forced to match those reports. The 122nd and 106th are talking about Ina, and from the headquarters, the reconnaissance is also not Pisa. About her Kupiansk.
According to the Rybar channel, which is affiliated with the Ministry of Defense, the situation in the city for Russian troops has become worse than critical. Russians write that a significant part of the bridgehead on the western bank of the Oskil River, including the villages of Kondrashovka, Rodkovka and Moskovka, as well as the area near the dairy canning plant, have been lost. Also, according to Rybar, in December, one of the units lost almost 1,500 soldiers on the approaches to one of the villages. Back in November. According to the published map of hostilities, most of Kupiansk is now under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces, and clashes continue only on its northeastern outskirts.
Thanks to the efforts of the Ukrainian Defense Forces, various units and different security agencies, control over Kupiansk was regained. Now we can observe the development of a rather difficult situation for the Russian occupation forces.
Probably Putin could find some alternative ways to get information if he really wanted to. But obviously he is satisfied with everything as it is. In other words, he wants to be lied to, and as long as those lies satisfy him, that's enough. Again, the generals are, in a way, Putin's allies in his internal bureaucratic struggle against all those boring and gloomy economists who constantly tell him that maybe it's time to stop, maybe it's worth considering a ceasefire.
Well, as long as Russian generals keep painting fake victories for Putin, he continues to believe in this illusion. But on the front lines, the reality is completely different. And that's exactly what we're seeing now in Kupiansk.
That's all for now. Stay with us to be the first to know what's happening right now. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.